Victoria Hayes pointed at the man in gray coveralls and said 5 words that would haunt her for years. "He's just a janitor." Marcus Webb heard every syllable. His hands stopped moving, his jaw tightened. But he didn't turn toward the woman in the designer suit. He turned toward the hallway where his 7-year-old daughter Emma sat watching from a plastic chair, her eyes wide, absorbing everything. She had heard it too. What Victoria didn't know, what no one in that building knew, was that the janitor she just dismissed held the only solution to a crisis that would bring Hartwell Tower to its knees. Comment your city below so I can see how far this story travels. The emergency alarm split the morning air at 7:42 a.m. Marcus Webb was mopping the east corridor of the 42nd floor when the lights flickered twice, then died. The backup generators kicked in 3 seconds later, 2 seconds longer than they should have. He noticed. He always noticed. His mop stopped mid-stroke. The elevator bank to his left went dark. The digital displays above each door flickered with error codes he recognized immediately. The HVAC system overhead changed pitch, a subtle shift that most people would never detect, but Marcus heard it the way a mechanic hears an engine knock. Something was very wrong. He pulled his phone from his pocket and checked the time. Emma would be finishing breakfast in the lobby daycare right now. He needed to get to her. "Daddy!" He spun around. Emma was running toward him down the corridor, her oversized backpack bouncing against her small frame. The daycare supervisor, Mrs. Patterson, hurried behind her, apologizing. "Mr. Webb, I'm so sorry she heard the alarm and just took off before I could stop her." Marcus knelt down and caught Emma in his arms. Hey, it's okay. I've got you." The lights went out, Emma said, her voice trembling. "And everyone started yelling." "I know, sweetheart. But look." He pointed up at the emergency lights glowing steady above them. "See? The building knows how to take care of itself, just like Daddy taught you." Emma nodded, but she gripped his sleeve and didn't let go. Mrs. Patterson wrung her hands. "Should I take her back down? They're saying it might be a drill, but nobody seems to know." "I'll keep her with me," Marcus said. "If it's a drill, it'll be over soon. If it's not, I want her close." Mrs. Patterson hesitated, then nodded. "Okay, just let us know if you need anything." She hurried back toward the stairwell. Marcus watched her go, then looked down at Emma. "You ready to be Daddy's helper today?" Emma's eyes brightened slightly. "Can I push the cart?" "Maybe later. Right now I need you to sit tight and be my lookout." "Can you do that?" "What am I looking out for?" "Anything interesting." He guided her to a plastic chair near the glass partition that separated the main corridor from the operations hub. Through the glass, he could see the chaos unfolding. Screens flashing, red, people rushing back and forth. Phones pressed to ears, voices rising with stress. "Sit here," he said. "Don't move. I need to check something." "Okay, Daddy." He kissed the top of her head and walked toward the operations hub, positioning himself near the entrance where he could observe without being noticed. Inside, a young technician named Derek was arguing with 2 of his colleagues. "The pressure readings don't make sense," Derek said, jabbing at a monitor. "Look at this, floor 39 shows normal, floor 40 shows critical, floor 41 shows normal again. That's impossible." "Maybe the sensors are malfunctioning," the other technician offered. "All of them. At the same time, on 3 different floors." Marcus watched. He listened. And he understood. It wasn't a sensor malfunction. It was a calibration drift in the reference system, something he had suspected for months. The building's integrated management system was receiving bad data and making logical decisions based on false premises. Every fix they attempted would only make things worse because they were treating symptoms instead of the disease. He opened his mouth to speak. That was when Victoria Hayes arrived. Her heels struck the polished concrete with the rhythm of a woman who expected doors to open before she reached them. She wore authority like armor, and her eyes swept the room with the efficiency of a scanner, cataloging faces, assessing competence, dismissing anything that fell below her threshold of relevance. Marcus had seen her type before, had worked for her type before, had built things for her type before in another life. She stopped at the center of the operations hub and raised her voice above the noise. Status, now. Derek stepped forward, tablet in hand. Ms. Hayes, we're seeing cascading failures across multiple systems. HVAC elevators, pressure regulation, fire suppression, they're all interconnected through the building management network, and something is causing them to feed bad data to each other. We don't know yet. Then find out. What about the consultants from Meridian Tech? They installed this system 18 months ago. Get them on the phone. Already done. They're sending a team, but they can't be here until tomorrow morning. Victoria's jaw tightened. Tomorrow isn't good enough. This building has 12 major corporate tenants. Patterson and Associates bills $4,000 an hour per partner. Every minute of disruption costs us money and credibility. I want solutions, not excuses. She turned her gaze, sweeping the room again, and this time it landed on Marcus. He was standing near the doorway, mop handle in one hand, watching the screens with an expression that didn't match his uniform. His eyes moved across the data with focus, with understanding. One of the junior analysts, a young woman named Sarah, noticed him too. She glanced at the screens, then at Marcus, then back at the screens. Something flickered across her face. Recognition, maybe, or curiosity. She took a step toward him. Hey, do you... Victoria's voice cut through like a blade. He's just a janitor. The words landed with surgical precision. Sarah stopped mid-step, her mouth closed. She looked away, embarrassed, as if she'd been caught doing something foolish. Marcus felt the impact of those 5 words in his chest. Not because they hurt, he had heard worse, but because of what happened next. He turned his head toward the hallway. Emma was watching. Her small face was pressed against the glass partition. Her eyes were wide, and in them, Marcus saw something break, some innocent belief about the world, some trust that people were kind, some faith that her father was valued. She had heard everything. Victoria didn't notice. She had already moved on, barking orders at her team, demanding updates, projecting the confidence of someone who believed the crisis would yield to her authority. But Marcus noticed. He noticed the way Emma's shoulders dropped, the way her hands fell into her lap, the way she looked down at the floor as if she had done something wrong. He walked back to her and knelt down. Hey, you okay? Emma didn't look up. That lady said you're just a janitor. I heard. But you're not just a janitor. You're my daddy. Marcus's throat tightened. That's right. And you know lots of things. You know how the building works. You tell me stories about the machines. I do. Emma finally looked up, and her eyes were wet. Then why did she say that? Why did she say it like it was a bad thing? Marcus didn't have an answer. Or rather, he had too many answers about class, about credentials, about the invisible hierarchies that sorted people into categories of worth. But none of them were things he wanted to teach a 7-year-old. So he said the only thing he could. Some people only see what they expect to see, sweetheart. It doesn't mean they're right. But it's mean. Yeah, it is. Emma wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. Daddy? Yeah? Are you going to help them fix the building? Marcus looked through the glass at the chaos inside the operations hub. Victoria was on the phone now, her voice rising with frustration. Derek and his team were running diagnostics that would lead nowhere. The screens continued to flash red. He knew what was wrong. He knew how to fix it. And he knew that no one in that room would listen to him because he was just a janitor. I don't know, sweetheart, he said. I don't know. The hours crawled by. Marcus returned to his work, pushing his cart through corridors that grew increasingly chaotic as the building's systems continued to fail. Elevators stopped on wrong floors. Air conditioning cut out in some areas, while blasting frigid air in others. Temperature swings made entire floors uncomfortable, then uninhabitable. And through it all, Emma stayed close. She sat in her plastic chair when Marcus needed to work nearby. She walked beside him when he moved to different floors. She asked questions in her quiet voice, and Marcus answered them the best he could. "Why is the air so cold here, Daddy?" "The building is confused. It thinks this floor is too hot, so it's trying to cool it down." "But it's not too hot. It's freezing." "I know. The building is working with bad information. Why doesn't someone tell it the right information?" Marcus smiled sadly. "That's a very good question, sweetheart." Around noon, he found himself on the 41st floor, near the mechanical room where the pressure regulation subsystem was housed. The readings on the digital display outside the door confirmed what he already suspected: the reference sensors were feeding corrupted data to the main system. He could fix it. He knew exactly what needed to be done. He hesitated. In his pocket was a small notebook, worn spiral-bound, filled with 3 years of observations. Temperature logs, pressure readings, maintenance notes, patterns he had detected during his night shifts when the building spoke only to those patient enough to listen. He had never shown it to anyone, had never considered that it might have value. But now, "Daddy, what's that noise?" Marcus listened. There it was, a high-pitched whine coming from the ventilation system, barely audible but unmistakable. The pressure differential was building toward a dangerous threshold. If nothing changed, the system would trigger a cascade that could affect the fire suppression network. He had to do something. "Stay here," he told Emma. "Don't move." He walked toward the operations hub, his notebook in hand. The chaos inside had intensified. More screens, more people, more phones ringing. Victoria was in the center of it all, arguing with someone on a conference call. "I don't care about your timeline," she was saying. "I need answers now, not tomorrow. Every hour this continues, we lose tenant confidence. Do you understand what that costs?" Marcus waited until she hung up. Then he approached Derek, who was the least intimidating person in the room. "Excuse me." Derek looked up, confusion flashing across his face. "Can I help you?" "The pressure readings on 41, Marcus said quietly. "They're cycling in a pattern, 12-minute intervals, always spiking at the same relative value. That suggests a reference drift in the calibration baseline. If you check the backup logs from last October, you'll probably find the original deviation point." Derek stared at him. "I'm sorry, what?" "The system isn't failing randomly. It's responding logically to bad data. The original calibration was off, and the error has been compounding for 18 months. Every fix you implement will make things worse unless you address the source." Derek's mouth opened, but no words came out. From across the room, a voice cut through. "What's going on here?" It was Victoria. She strode toward them, her eyes moving from Derek to Marcus and back again. Her expression shifted when she registered the gray coveralls, the mop handle, the cleaning cart visible through the glass. "He was just..." Derek started. "He was just leaving," Victoria said. She turned to Marcus, and her voice dropped to something that might have been patience in another context, but here was simply dismissal. "We appreciate your concern, but this is a technical matter. The operations team has it under control." Marcus met her eyes. For a moment he considered pushing back, considered showing her the notebook, considered explaining that he had spent 10 years as a systems engineer before his wife died and his life collapsed, and he chose a job that let him be present for his daughter. But he saw the wall behind her eyes. The certainty. The categories already in place. Janitor irrelevant, not worth hearing. "Yes, ma'am," he said. He turned and walked away. That evening, Marcus sat in the break room on the 38th floor while Emma did her homework at the table across from him. The building had quieted somewhat as most employees went home, but the crisis continued. Through the window, he could see the operations hub on the floor above, still lit up, still populated by people chasing solutions that wouldn't work. "Daddy." Yeah, sweetheart. Emma looked up from her math worksheet. When you told that man about the building, the one with the glasses, why didn't he listen? Marcus set down his coffee. He wanted to listen. I think he did. But someone else decided it wasn't worth it. The lady in the red shoes. Yeah. Emma's pencil tapped against the table. She wasn't very nice. She's under a lot of pressure. Sometimes when people are stressed, they don't make good choices about how to treat others. But you're stressed too, and you're still nice. Marcus smiled. I have you to keep me honest. Emma returned to her worksheet, but after a moment, she spoke again without looking up. Daddy, if you could fix the building, would you? What do you mean? If they let you, if they listened. Could you fix it? Marcus was quiet for a long time. Yeah, he finally said. I think I could. Emma nodded, as if this confirmed something she already knew. Then I hope they listen soon, because the air is still weird and my ears keep popping. Marcus reached across the table and squeezed her hand. Me too, sweetheart. Me too. Later that night, long after Emma had fallen asleep on the break room couch, Marcus walked his rounds alone. The building was different at night. Quieter, more honest. During the day, it was a machine for making money floors of offices, conference rooms, corner suites. But at night, it became something else. A living system with its own rhythms, its own complaints, its own secrets. Marcus understood those secrets better than anyone. He stopped at the 41st floor mechanical room and pressed his hand against the door. He could feel the vibration through the metal, subtle, irregular wrong. Inside his pocket, his notebook waited. 3 years of observations. 3 years of listening when no one else would. 3 years of understanding a building that revealed itself only to those patient enough to pay attention. He thought about Victoria's words. Just a janitor. He thought about Emma's eyes when she heard them. He thought about his wife Claire, who had always believed in him, who had told him on her deathbed that he was meant for more than he allowed himself to imagine. And he thought about the choice he had made 3 years ago when he walked away from a 6-figure engineering career to take a night shift custodial job because his daughter needed a father more than the world needed another systems consultant. He didn't regret that choice. Not for a moment. But standing here now, with a building failing around him and no one willing to listen, he wondered if he had been too quick to make himself invisible. Maybe invisibility wasn't protection. Maybe it was just a slower form of surrender. He pulled his hand away from the door and walked back toward the break room where Emma slept peacefully, unaware of the storms building around her. Tomorrow, the crisis would deepen. Tomorrow, the consultants would arrive with their credentials and their confidence and their solutions that wouldn't work. Tomorrow, Hartwell Tower would take another step toward catastrophe. And Marcus Webb, the invisible man, the widower, the single father, the janitor who wasn't just a janitor, would have to decide how much longer he could stay silent. The morning came without mercy. Marcus woke to the sound of Emma's voice, soft and uncertain, calling his name from across the break room. "Daddy! Daddy, wake up!" He opened his eyes. His neck ached from sleeping upright in the plastic chair, his back protesting every movement as he straightened. Emma stood beside him, her hand on his arm, her face tight with worry. "The lights are doing that thing again," she said. "The flickery thing." Marcus looked up. She was right. The fluorescent panels overhead were cycling bright, dim, in a rhythm that told him the power regulation systems were now affected. The crisis was spreading. "What time is it?" he asked. "I don't know. My tablet died." He checked his phone. 6:47 a.m. His shift had officially ended 4 hours ago, but he hadn't left. Couldn't leave. Not with Emma here, not with the building failing around them. "Okay," he said, pushing himself to his feet. "Let's get you some breakfast." "The cafeteria is closed. Mrs. Patterson texted you. She said the daycare isn't opening today because of the emergency." Marcus rubbed his eyes. Of course. Nothing was going to be normal today. All right. We'll figure something out. Come on. He took her hand and led her out of the break room, his mind already calculating options. His mother lived 40 minutes away and couldn't drive anymore. His sister was in Phoenix. The neighbors he might have asked had moved last year. Emma would have to stay with him. Again. They made their way to the 42nd floor where Marcus had stashed some granola bars and juice boxes in his locker for exactly this kind of situation. The corridor was already buzzing with activity. Security guards directing confused employees, maintenance workers running cables, executives shouting into phones. And in the center of it all, Victoria Hayes. She looked like she hadn't slept either. Her suit was the same one from yesterday, slightly wrinkled now. Her hair, which had been perfect, showed signs of hasty repair. But her voice was just as sharp, her commands just as precise. "I want the Meridian team in the operations hub the moment they arrive," she was saying to Derek. "And get me the building's original engineering specs. All of them. Going back to construction. Ms. Hayes, the archives are in the basement. With the elevator situation, then take the stairs. I don't care how you get them. Just get them." Derek nodded and hurried away. Marcus guided Emma past the chaos, keeping close to the wall, staying invisible. They reached his locker without incident, and he pulled out the small stash of emergency supplies. "Here," he said, handing Emma a granola bar. "Not exactly pancakes, but it'll do." Emma unwrapped it without enthusiasm. "Daddy, why are all these people running around? The building is still sick. They're trying to figure out how to make it better." "But you already know, don't you?" Marcus paused. "What makes you say that?" "Because you always know. You know when the elevator is going to make that funny noise. You know when the water fountain is going to stop working. You know everything about this building." He knelt down to her level. "Emma, it's complicated. These people, they have degrees, training. They went to special schools to learn how to fix things like this. But they haven't fixed it. Not yet. And you could fix it." It wasn't a question. It was a statement of faith delivered with the absolute certainty that only a child could muster. Marcus didn't know what to say. "Just eat your breakfast," he finally managed. "We'll talk about it later." Emma bit into her granola bar, but her eyes never left his face. The Meridian Tech team arrived at 9:15 a.m., 3 consultants in expensive suits, carrying laptops and tablets, and the unshakable confidence of people who charged $500 an hour for their expertise. Marcus watched them from his position near the east corridor, where he was pretending to clean a section of floor that didn't need cleaning. Emma sat in her usual spot, the plastic chair that had become her unofficial station, her coloring book open on her lap. The lead consultant was a tall man with silver hair and a name tag that read, Dr. Harrison Wells. He shook Victoria's hand with the practiced warmth of someone who had delivered bad news to powerful people many times before. "Ms. Hayes, we came as quickly as we could." "Not quickly enough," Victoria said. "The situation has deteriorated overnight. We're now seeing irregularities in the power distribution network in addition to everything else. Yes, we've been monitoring the data remotely. It's concerning, but not unprecedented. We've seen similar cascade patterns in other integrated management systems. Then you know how to fix it." Dr. Wells hesitated just for a moment, just long enough for Marcus to notice. "We have some theories we'd like to explore. With your permission, we'd like full access to the control systems and the mechanical infrastructure." "Whatever you need. Derek will be your liaison." The consultants followed Derek toward the operations hub, already conferring among themselves in low voices. Marcus caught fragments of their conversation: calibration protocols, sensor redundancy, systematic diagnostics. They were going to start from scratch, run the same tests that had already been run, analyze the same data that had already been analyzed, and reach the same dead ends that everyone else had reached, because they were looking at the system instead of listening to the building. Marcus shook his head and returned to his work. By noon, the consultants had produced their first report. Marcus learned about it the way he learned about most things in Hartwell Tower, by being invisible in the right place at the right time. The preliminary assessment is inconclusive. Dr. Wells was telling Victoria in the operations hub. The cascade appears to originate from the HVAC subsystem, but the trigger mechanism is unclear. We're seeing data anomalies that don't match any known failure pattern. What does that mean in practical terms? It means we need more time. We'd like to bring in additional specialists, thermal engineers, network security experts, possibly someone from the original installation team. Victoria's voice was ice. You're telling me that 3 consultants from the company that installed this system can't diagnose what's wrong with it? I'm telling you that this is a complex integrated system with multiple interdependent subsystems. Rushing to a solution could make things worse. Things are already worse, Dr. Wells. I have tenants threatening to break their leases. I have a fire marshal breathing down my neck. I have an ownership group that wants answers I can't give them. I understand the pressure you're under. No, you don't. Because when this is over, you'll go back to your office and write a report and send us a bill. But I'll be the one who has to explain to the board why their flagship property turned into a liability overnight. The conversation continued, but Marcus had heard enough. He walked back to where Emma was sitting, her coloring book now abandoned in favor of watching the adults argue through the glass partition. They're fighting, she observed. They're disagreeing. Is that different? Sometimes. Emma considered this. The lady with the red shoes looks really mad. She's scared? Marcus said. When grown-ups are scared, sometimes they act mad instead. Why? Because being mad feels stronger than being scared. Emma nodded slowly, filing this information away with the seriousness of a child who was learning hard truths too early. Daddy. Yeah. Are you scared? Marcus looked at his daughter, her wide eyes, her messy braids, her backpack sitting beside her chair like a loyal companion. She was 7 years old. She should be in school right now learning fractions and reading stories about talking animals. Instead, she was sitting in a plastic chair in a failing building, watching her father be invisible. A little, he admitted, but not because of the building. Then what? He didn't answer, because the truth was too complicated for words, that he was scared of what Emma was learning about the world, about how people were valued, about what happened to those who didn't fit the categories that mattered. Come on, he said instead. Let's go for a walk. They walked, through corridors that hummed with tension, past offices where workers huddled in small groups whispering about evacuation rumors and lease clauses, down stairwells that echoed with the footsteps of people who had lost faith in the elevators. Emma held his hand the entire time. Daddy, why don't you tell them what you know? The question came as they reached the 41st floor near the mechanical room where Marcus knew the problem originated. I tried, sweetheart, remember. But you could try again. You could show them your notebook. Marcus stopped walking. How do you know about my notebook? I see you writing in it sometimes, at night when you think I'm sleeping. He should have known. Emma noticed everything. That notebook, it's just observations, notes I make about the building. Nobody would understand them. But they're important. I can tell by the way you look when you're writing. Like the way you look when you're helping me with my homework. Like you're figuring something out. Marcus knelt down. Emma, the people in charge, they went to fancy schools. They have degrees on their walls and titles on their business cards. To them, I'm just the guy who mops the floors. But that's not all you are. I know that, and you know that. But they don't. Then make them know. Her voice was fierce, fiercer than he'd ever heard it. Make them see you, Daddy, the way I see you. Marcus stared at his daughter. In that moment, she looked so much like Claire that his heart clenched. Claire who had never let him shrink. Claire who had always pushed him to be more than he believed he could be. Claire who had died 3 years ago and left him with this beautiful, impossible child who carried her mother's fire. It's not that simple, sweetheart. Why not? Because the world doesn't work that way. Because people see what they expect to see. Because I chose to be invisible, and now I don't know how to be seen again. He said none of these things. Let's keep walking, he said instead. I want to check something. They continued down the corridor until they reached the mechanical room. Marcus paused at the door, pressing his palm against the metal surface. The vibration was worse. Much worse. Stay here, he told Emma. Right here. Don't move. Okay, Daddy. He pushed open the door and stepped inside. The room was a maze of pipes, conduits, and control panels, the hidden cardiovascular system of the building. Most people would see chaos. Marcus saw patterns. He moved to the primary pressure regulation console and studied the readings. The numbers confirmed what he already knew. The reference drift had accelerated overnight, and the system was now compensating in increasingly erratic ways. At the current rate of degradation, the building would trigger a fire suppression cascade within 48 hours. When that happened, the city fire marshal would order a mandatory evacuation. Hartwell Tower would be empty for weeks, maybe months, while investigators tried to determine what went wrong. All because of a single miscalibrated sensor. All because nobody would listen to a janitor. Marcus pulled out his notebook and flipped to a page near the back, a diagram he had drawn 6 months ago, showing the relationship between the pressure regulation subsystem and the building's integrated management network. He had identified the vulnerability, then had considered reporting. It had ultimately decided it wasn't his place. Not his place. He had made himself invisible, and now people were going to suffer for it. Daddy! Emma's voice came from the doorway. She had followed him inside despite his instructions. I told you to wait outside. I got scared. It's loud in here. She was right. The mechanical room was filled with the hum and whir of systems under stress. To a 7-year-old, it probably sounded like a monster breathing. Marcus closed his notebook and went to her. Let's go. This isn't a good place for you. Did you find what you were looking for? He looked back at the console at the readings that spelled disaster. Yeah, he said. I found it. Can you fix it? Maybe, if they let me. Then make them let you. Her words echoed Claire's voice so strongly that Marcus almost couldn't breathe. He took Emma's hand and led her out of the mechanical room back into the corridor, back toward the world that had decided he wasn't worth hearing. But something had shifted in him. He wasn't ready to act. Not yet, but he was ready to stop hiding. The afternoon brought more consultants. Dr. Wells had made good on his promise. 2 additional experts arrived, specialists in thermal dynamics and network architecture. They joined the growing team in the operations hub, adding their voices to the cacophony of analysis and speculation. Marcus watched from the margins as always. But now his watching had purpose. He observed the consultants running the same diagnostics he could have told them would fail. He listened to their debates about causation, their theories about trigger events, their proposals for systematic intervention. And he noted with grim satisfaction that none of them were looking in the right direction. They were treating the building like a machine, a collection of systems and subsystems that could be analyzed, optimized, corrected. But the building wasn't just a machine. It was a living thing with rhythms and habits and tendencies that only revealed themselves to those who paid attention over years, not hours. The consultants would never understand that. They didn't have time. But Marcus did. Around 3 p.m. he noticed something that made his blood run cold. The consultants were preparing to implement a fix. He could see them gathering around the main console, could hear Dr. Wells explaining the intervention to Victoria. We believe the cascade can be interrupted if we reset the pressure regulation baseline to factory defaults. It's a standard recovery protocol. Essentially, we're telling the system to forget everything it's learned and start fresh. Victoria nodded. How long will it take? A few hours. We'll need to shut down the HVAC network during the process, which will cause some discomfort, but it should be manageable. And you're confident this will work? Dr. Wells hesitated again, that same momentary pause Marcus had noticed before. Confident is a strong word, but it's our best option given the available data. Victoria considered for a moment, then nodded. Do it. Marcus's heart dropped. A factory reset wouldn't fix the problem. It would make it worse. The miscalibrated sensor would still be feeding bad data, but now the system would have no memory of its past compensations. The cascade would accelerate, and the pressure irregularities would spread to systems that had so far been unaffected. He had to say something. He stepped toward the operations hub, his hand reaching for the door. "Daddy!" Emma's voice stopped him. He turned. She was standing beside her chair, her coloring book clutched to her chest, her eyes fixed on his face. "Are you going to tell them?" "I have to try." "What if they don't listen again?" Marcus looked at his daughter. Then he looked through the glass at Victoria Hayes, who was signing off on a decision that would doom the building she was trying to save. "Then at least I'll know I tried." He pushed through the door. The operations hub fell quiet as he entered. Every head turned toward him. The consultants in their expensive suits, the technicians at their stations, Derek with his tablet, Victoria with her iron expression. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Dr. Wells stepped forward, his voice polite but dismissive. "I'm sorry, this is a restricted area during emergency operations. Staff only." "I am staff," Marcus said. "I work nights, maintenance and custodial." "Ah." Dr. Wells's expression shifted, the subtle recalibration of someone who had just categorized a person as irrelevant. "Well, I appreciate your concern, but this is a technical matter. Perhaps you could—" "The factory reset won't work." The words came out before Marcus could stop them. Louder than he intended. Clearer than he felt. Dr. Wells blinked. "I beg your pardon? The factory reset. It won't fix the cascade. It'll accelerate it." Silence. Victoria stepped forward, her eyes narrowing. "Explain." Marcus took a breath. He could feel every gaze in the room pressing down on him, weighing him, judging him. But he thought of Emma watching through the glass. He thought of Claire, who would never have let him stay silent. And he kept talking. "The cascade isn't originating from the HVAC subsystem. It's originating from a miscalibrated reference sensor in the pressure regulation network. The sensor was installed 18 months ago during the system upgrade. It was calibrated against an incorrect baseline, probably a documentation error that slipped through quality control." He paused, waiting for someone to interrupt. No one did. Over time, the bad data propagated through the integrated management system. The building started making corrections based on false readings, logical corrections individually, but catastrophic collectively. A factory reset won't address the underlying miscalibration. It'll just erase the compensatory behaviors the system developed, which are the only things keeping the cascade from spreading to life safety systems. Dr. Wells stared at him. "And you know this, how exactly?" "Because I've been watching this building for 3 years, every night shift, every system, every anomaly. I documented the calibration drift 6 months ago. I know exactly which sensor is affected and exactly how to correct it." The silence stretched. Then Dr. Wells laughed. It was a polite laugh, the kind professionals use when they're trying not to be openly condescending. That's quite a theory. But with respect, I have a doctorate in systems engineering and 15 years of experience with integrated building management. I think I understand the technical parameters here. Then explain the 12-minute pressure cycles on floors 39 through 42. Dr. Wells's smile faltered. The readings oscillate on a consistent interval because the reference sensor refreshes on a 12-minute loop. Every time it updates, it feeds the same incorrect data to the central processor, which triggers a compensation response. The pattern has been there since installation. It's in your own diagnostic logs. You just have to know what to look for. Victoria stepped closer. "You're saying you've seen this pattern before." "I'm saying I've been tracking this pattern for months. It's in my notebook." He pulled the worn, spiral-bound book from his pocket. 3 years of observations. Temperature logs, pressure readings, system behaviors that seemed insignificant individually but form patterns when viewed together. Victoria reached for the notebook, but Marcus hesitated. "I'll show you, but not if you're going to dismiss me again." The words hung in the air between them. Victoria's jaw tightened. For a long moment she said nothing. Then her expression shifted, something cracking behind the professional mask. "Show me," she said quietly. "Please." Marcus opened the notebook to the relevant page. He spread it on the console, pointing to the diagrams, the calculations, the careful observations of a man who had trained himself to see what others overlooked. He showed her the calibration drift. He showed her the propagation pattern. He showed her the exact path the cascade would take if they proceeded with the factory reset. And for the first time, Victoria Hayes looked at him. Really looked at him, not as a janitor, not as a line item in the facility's budget, but as a person who might actually know something worth knowing. "Why didn't you tell us this before?" Marcus's voice was steady. "I tried. You told me I was just a janitor." The words landed like stones. Victoria's face went pale. She opened her mouth closed. It opened it again. Behind him, Marcus heard the door to the operations hub swing open. He turned. Emma was standing there, her backpack over her shoulder, her chin raised. "My daddy knows everything about this building," she said. "You should listen to him." Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. And in that silence, something shifted in Hartwell Tower that had nothing to do with pressure readings or calibration sensors or integrated management systems. It was the sound of a wall beginning to crack. The operations hub remained frozen in the aftermath of Emma's words. Victoria stared at the small girl standing in the doorway, backpack straps clutched in both hands, chin lifted with a defiance that seemed too large for her 7-year-old frame. Then her gaze moved to Marcus, who had turned toward his daughter with an expression caught between pride and fear. Dr. Wells was the first to break the silence. "This is highly irregular," he said, his voice carrying the clipped irritation of a man whose authority had been challenged. "Ms. Hayes, I must insist that we return to the matter at hand. We have a proven protocol ready to implement, and every hour of delay. The protocol is wrong." Marcus's voice was quiet, but it cut through Dr. Wells's objection like a blade. "You reset the system to factory defaults, and within 6 hours, the pressure cascade will reach the fire suppression network. When that happens, you'll have false triggers across multiple floors. The fire marshal will order a full evacuation, and then you'll have weeks of investigation, millions in damages, and a building that nobody trusts." Dr. Wells's face reddened. "And you know this because you mop floors at night. I know this because I've spent 3 years listening to this building while you've spent 3 days looking at spreadsheets." The two men faced each other across the operations hub, one in an expensive suit with a doctorate on his wall, one in gray coveralls with calluses on his hands. The contrast was stark, almost theatrical, but there was nothing staged about the tension crackling between them. Victoria watched the exchange with an expression that had shifted from skepticism to something more complicated. Her eyes kept returning to the notebook spread open on the console, to the careful diagrams and meticulous observations that told a story she hadn't expected to find. "Dr. Wells," she said slowly, "what's the risk assessment on the factory reset?" "Minimal. We've implemented this protocol dozens of times across similar systems." "And what's the success rate?" Dr. Wells hesitated. "In comparable situations, approximately 85%. 85%. Victoria's voice was flat. "And the other 15%? There are always variables that can't be accounted for, but that's true of any intervention." Victoria turned to Marcus. "And your approach? What's the risk?" Marcus met her eyes. "I don't know. I've never done this before. Not on a system this complex, not with stakes this high. I could be wrong. The calibration drift could have affected components I haven't identified. There could be secondary failures I can't predict." Dr. Wells spread his hands. "There you have it. He admits he doesn't know what he's doing." "No," Marcus said. "I admit that I'm not certain. There's a difference. You're certain, and you're wrong. I'm uncertain, and I might be right." The question is, which kind of uncertainty you want to bet on. The room fell silent again. Emma had moved closer to her father during the exchange, her small hand finding his. She didn't speak, but her presence seemed to anchor Marcus to remind him why he was doing this. Victoria looked at the notebook again. Then she looked at Dr. Wells. Then she looked at Marcus. "Tell me exactly what you would do," she said. "Step by step." Marcus took a breath. The root cause is a reference sensor in the Pressure Regulation Network Unit, PR4107, installed during the system upgrade 18 months ago. It was calibrated against an incorrect baseline, probably because someone transposed 2 digits in the reference documentation. The error was small, less than 0.5%, but it's been compounding ever since. He pointed to a diagram in his notebook. The sensor feeds data to the central processor every 12 minutes. Each time it updates, the system receives slightly incorrect information about the pressure differential between floors 39 and 42. The integrated management network tries to compensate, which throws off the readings in adjacent systems, which triggers more compensations, which creates the cascade you're seeing now. And the solution? I need to access the central control room and manually recalibrate the reference sensor against the backup logs from before the installation. Then I need to walk the system through a controlled recalibration sequence, not a factory reset, but a targeted correction that preserves the compensatory behaviors while eliminating the source of the bad data. Dr. Wells scoffed. "That's not a standard protocol. There's no documentation for that approach." "Because nobody's ever needed it before. The system was designed assuming the initial calibration was correct. When it's not, you have to improvise." Improvise. Dr. Wells turned to Victoria. "Ms. Hayes, you can't seriously be considering this. We're talking about a multi-million-dollar integrated management system. You want to hand it over to a janitor who's going to improvise?" Victoria didn't respond immediately. She was looking at Emma, who had pressed herself against her father's side, her eyes fixed on Victoria's face with an intensity that was almost unnerving. "How long would it take?" Victoria asked finally. 4 hours, maybe 5. I need everyone out of the control room, no interruptions, no oversight, no consultants looking over my shoulder and second-guessing every decision." "That's absurd," Dr. Wells said. "You can't expect—" "I can't work with an audience," Marcus interrupted. "Either you trust me to do this, or you don't. But if you're going to stand behind me questioning every keystroke, I might as well not try at all." Victoria was quiet for a long moment. Marcus could see the calculation happening behind her eyes. The risk assessment, the career implications, the weight of everything she had built, pressing against the possibility that she might be wrong about who held the answers. 4 hours, she said finally. "I'll clear the control room, but I want updates every 30 minutes. No updates, no check-ins, 4 hours of silence, and then either the building is fixed or it isn't. That's not acceptable. Then find someone else." The ultimatum hung in the air. Dr. Wells stepped forward. "Ms. Hayes, this is reckless. If something goes wrong..." "If something goes wrong, I'll take responsibility." Marcus's voice was steady. "You can tell the board, the tenants, whoever you need to tell that the janitor overstepped his bounds and made things worse. Your reputation stays intact. The consultants walk away clean. All the blame falls on me." Victoria stared at him. "Why would you offer that?" "Because I have a daughter who's watching, and I want her to see that sometimes doing the right thing matters more than protecting yourself." Emma squeezed her father's hand. For a long moment, nobody spoke. The hum of the building's stressed systems filled the silence, a constant reminder that time was running out. Then Victoria turned to Dr. Wells. "Stand down," she said. "Excuse me." "You heard me. Halt the factory reset. Clear the control room. Mr. Webb is going to have his 4 hours." Dr. Wells's face went from red to white. "This is a mistake. When this fails, and it will fail, I want it on record that I objected." "Noted. Now clear the room." The consultant held her gaze for a moment longer, then turned and gestured sharply to his team. They gathered their laptops and tablets with the stiff movements of professionals who had just been overruled by someone they considered beneath them. As they filed out, Dr. Wells paused at the door. 4 hours, he said. And when this building is still failing tomorrow, I expect you to remember who tried to warn you. He walked out without waiting for a response. Victoria watched him go, then turned back to Marcus. The control room is on sub-level 2. Security will give you access. Is there anything else you need? Just time, and for everyone to stay out of my way. Victoria nodded. Then her gaze dropped to Emma, who was still pressed against her father's side. Your daughter? She stays with me. In the control room, during a critical system intervention. She stays with me, Marcus repeated. That's not negotiable. Victoria opened her mouth as if to argue, then closed it. Something in Marcus's expression told her this was not a battle she would win. Fine, but if anything happens to her, nothing will happen to her. She's the reason I'm doing this at all. Victoria held his gaze for a moment, searching for something sincerity perhaps, or the kind of confidence that justified the risk she was taking. Whatever she found seemed to satisfy her. 4 hours, she said. Clock starts now. She turned and walked out of the operations hub, leaving Marcus and Emma alone among the blinking screens and humming servers. Emma looked up at her father. Daddy, are you scared? Marcus knelt down to her level. Yeah, sweetheart. I'm scared. But you're going to do it anyway. Yeah, I'm going to do it anyway. Emma nodded as if this made perfect sense. Okay, she said. Let's go fix the building. The control room was colder than the rest of the building, a deliberate choice Marcus knew to keep the servers running optimally. Emma shivered as they entered, and he took off his work jacket and draped it over her shoulders. It's freezing in here, she said. I know, but the computers like it cold. They work better that way. That's weird. A lot of things about buildings are weird. You get used to it. He guided her to a chair in the corner away from the main console, but close enough that he could see her if he turned his head. I need you to stay right there, he said. No matter what happens, no matter what I say, you stay in that chair. Okay? Okay, Daddy. And if anyone tries to come in, anyone at all, you come tell me immediately. Even the lady with the red shoes. Especially her. But I don't think she'll come. She gave her word. Emma settled into the chair, pulling his jacket tighter around her shoulders. Daddy! Yeah! You're gonna be amazing! Marcus felt his throat tighten. For a moment he couldn't speak. Thanks, sweetheart, he managed finally. I'm going to try. He turned to the main console and took a deep breath. 3 years of observations. 3 years of listening. 3 years of understanding a building that spoke only to those patient enough to hear. It all came down to this. He began. The first hour was the hardest. Marcus worked in near silence, his fingers moving across keyboards and touchscreens with a fluency that revealed years of suppressed expertise. The control room responded to his commands like an instrument being played by a master who had been forbidden from performing. He navigated through layers of diagnostic menus, past security protocols and administrative locks, into the deep architecture of the building's integrated management system. Most people would have seen chaos, thousands of data points, hundreds of subsystems, an incomprehensible web of interdependencies. Marcus saw patterns. What are you doing, Daddy? Emma's voice came from the corner, curious but not intrusive. I'm talking to the building. What's it saying? Marcus paused, considering how to explain. It's confused. Someone told it something wrong a long time ago, and it's been trying to make sense of that wrong information ever since. Every time it tries to fix something, it makes other things worse. It's like if I told you that 2 + 2 = 5, and then asked you to do all your math homework based on that. That would mess everything up. Exactly. so I'm trying to find the place where the mistake started and fix it. How do you know where to look? Because I've been listening to the building for a long time. I know what it sounds like when it's working right. And I know what it sounds like when something's wrong. Emma was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Like when you can tell I'm sad, even when I don't say anything." Marcus stopped typing. He turned to look at his daughter bundled in his too large jacket, her small face serious in the blue glow of the monitors. "Yeah," he said softly. "Exactly like that." He turned back to the console and resumed his work. The second hour brought the first real challenge. Marcus had located the faulty sensor PR4107 exactly where he had predicted, but accessing its calibration settings required administrative privileges he didn't have. The system kept rejecting his commands, locking him out of the deeper configuration menus. He sat back in his chair, frustration building in his chest. "What's wrong, Daddy?" "The building won't let me in." "Why not?" "Because I don't have the right password." Emma considered this. "Can you guess it?" "It's not that kind of password. It's more like..." He paused, searching for the right analogy. "It's like a door that only opens for certain people, and I'm not one of those people." "But you're trying to help. The building should know that." "Buildings don't know things like that, sweetheart. They only follow rules." "That's dumb." Despite everything, Marcus laughed. "Yeah, it kind of is." He stared at the screen thinking, there had to be a way around this. The system was designed to keep unauthorized users out, but it was also designed to be maintained. There had to be a maintenance pathway, a service protocol that would grant temporary access. Then he remembered. 3 months ago, during a routine inspection, he had watched one of the Meridian technicians access the system through a diagnostic mode. The technician had used a specific key sequence, something Marcus had filed away in his memory without really understanding why. He entered the sequence. The screen flickered. A new menu appeared. Service mode. The header read, followed by a warning about voiding warranties and accepting liability. Marcus accepted. The system opened to him. "Daddy, you did it." "Not yet, sweetheart. This is just the door. I still have to find what's on the other side." But he was smiling as he said it. The third hour was when everything almost fell apart. Marcus had successfully accessed the sensor's calibration settings and identified the original error, a baseline pressure value that was 0.47% lower than it should have been. A tiny discrepancy invisible to casual inspection, but devastating when compounded over 18 months of continuous operation. He began the recalibration sequence, and the building fought back. The integrated management system had spent 18 months learning to compensate for the bad data. It had developed workarounds, redundancies, adaptive behaviors that kept it functioning despite the underlying error. When Marcus tried to correct the source, the system interpreted his intervention as a threat. Alarms began to sound. Error messages flooded the screens. The temperature in the control room dropped sharply as the HVAC system lurched into emergency mode. "Daddy!" Emma had jumped out of her chair, her eyes wide with fear. "It's okay," Marcus said, though his voice was tight with strain. "It's okay, sweetheart. The building is just scared. It doesn't understand what I'm trying to do." "Make it understand." "I'm trying." His fingers flew across the keyboard, racing against the cascade of errors. He had anticipated resistance, but not this much. The system was more integrated, more interdependent than he had realized. Every correction he made triggered 3 new alarms. He needed to slow down, needed to approach this differently. "Daddy, I'm cold." Marcus glanced at Emma. She was shivering despite his jacket, her arms wrapped around herself. "I know, sweetheart. I know. Just a little longer." He turned back to the console and forced himself to think. The building was like a person, he reminded himself. A person who had been told lies for so long that the truth felt threatening. You couldn't just confront someone like that head on. You had to be gentle, patient, You had to rebuild trust one small step at a time. He stopped trying to fix everything at once. Instead, he started with a single subsystem, the pressure regulation on floor 41, the source of the original error. He isolated it from the rest of the network, creating a bubble of corrected data that wouldn't trigger alarms in other systems. The error messages slowed. The temperature stabilized. Marcus exhaled. "Is it working?" Emma asked. "Maybe. I don't know yet." But he was starting to believe it might. The fourth hour was quiet. Marcus worked with focused intensity, methodically extending the corrected calibration from floor 41 to adjacent systems. He moved slowly, carefully, testing each change before implementing the next. The building resisted at first, then gradually accepted like a patient learning to trust a doctor who had finally made the right diagnosis. Emma had stopped asking questions. She sat in her corner watching her father with an expression of absolute faith that made his heart ache. He thought about Claire. She had been the one who encouraged him to pursue engineering in the first place. "You see things other people don't," she had told him once early in their relationship. "That's a gift. You should use it." He had used it. For 10 years he had built systems and solved problems and earned a reputation as someone who could make sense of complexity. And then Claire got sick, and everything changed. He remembered the last conversation they'd had 3 days before she died. She had been weak, barely able to speak, but she had summoned enough strength to grab his hand and pull him close. "Don't disappear," she had whispered. "Promise me." "I won't," he had said, but he had. He had disappeared into grief, into single fatherhood, into the comfortable anonymity of a night shift cleaning job. He had told himself it was for Emma's sake that she needed a present father more than the world needed another systems engineer. Maybe that was true. Maybe it wasn't. What he knew now was that Emma needed more than just presence. She needed a father who stood up for himself, who refused to be invisible, who showed her that a person's worth wasn't determined by their job title or their paycheck or what other people assumed about them. He checked the time. 3 hours and 47 minutes. Almost done. "Daddy." "Yeah, sweetheart." The beeping stopped. Marcus looked at the console. She was right. The alarm indicators had gone silent. The error messages had cleared. The screens displayed steady green readings across every system. He ran a final diagnostic. The results came back clean. "Daddy, did you do it? Did you fix the building?" Marcus stared at the screens, not quite believing what he was seeing. "Yeah," he said slowly. "Yeah, I think I did." Emma launched herself out of her chair and into his arms. He caught her, lifting her off the ground, holding her tight against his chest. "I knew you could do it," she said, her voice muffled against his shoulder. "I knew it the whole time." "You did, didn't you?" "Uh-huh, because you're my daddy. And you're amazing." Marcus closed his eyes and held his daughter, letting the weight of the past 4 hours settle into something he could carry. He had done it. He had actually done it. The door to the control room opened. Victoria Hayes stood in the entrance, her face unreadable. Behind her, Marcus could see Derek and 2 security guards, their expressions tense with anticipation. 4 hours and 3 minutes, Victoria said. "You're late." "I was thorough." She stepped into the room, her eyes moving to the screens. She studied the readings for a long moment, her expression shifting from skepticism to surprise to something that might have been wonder. "The cascade indicators," she said. "They're all green." "I know. The pressure readings are stable. The HVAC is normalized. The fire suppression system is showing full operational capacity." "I know." Victoria turned to face him. For a moment she didn't speak. Then she asked the question that Marcus had been waiting for since this whole ordeal began. "How did you know it would work?" Marcus set Emma down gently and met Victoria's eyes. "I didn't," he said. "But I understood the building. Your consultants understood the system. Those aren't the same thing." Victoria was quiet for a long moment. "I owe you an apology," she said finally. Yes, you do. The bluntness of his response seemed to surprise her, but she didn't flinch. I called you just a janitor. I dismissed you without considering that you might have something to offer. I was wrong. You were. I'm sorry. The words hung in the air between them, simple, inadequate, but genuine. Marcus looked at his daughter, then back at Victoria. I've been dismissed my whole life, he said. By teachers who thought I wasn't smart enough. By employers who thought I wasn't ambitious enough. By people who looked at my hands and my uniform and decided they already knew everything they needed to know about me. I've learned to live with it. But my daughter. His voice caught. My daughter is 7 years old, and today she learned that the world will judge her father will judge her by things that don't matter, by titles and clothes and assumptions. She learned that people will look right through her and decide she's not worth seeing. He paused. That's the thing I can't forgive, not the insult to me. The lesson you taught her about what she's worth. Victoria's face had gone pale. She stopped, started again. I didn't think... No, you didn't. Emma tugged at her father's sleeve. Daddy, it's okay. I know who you are. Marcus looked down at his daughter, and the anger in his chest softened. Yeah, sweetheart, I know you do. He turned back to Victoria. I'm not asking for anything from you. Not recognition, not a promotion, not money. What happened today, I did it because it needed to be done, because people were going to be hurt if someone didn't act. That's reason enough. Victoria nodded slowly. But if you want to make this right, Marcus continued, don't make it about me. Make it about the people like me. The security guards and the maintenance workers and the cleaning staff who keep this building running every single day. The invisible people who know things the executives will never learn because they actually pay attention instead of just looking at spreadsheets. He held her gaze. See them. Listen to them. Let them be more than line items in a budget. Victoria was silent for a long time. Then she did something Marcus didn't expect. She knelt down until she was at Emma's eye level. You're right, she said to the little girl. Your daddy is amazing, and I'm sorry I didn't see that before. Emma studied her face with the frank assessment of a child who hadn't yet learned to accept apologies just because they were offered. Daddy says sometimes people only see what they expect to see. It takes something unusual to help them see differently. Victoria nodded. Your daddy is very wise. I know. Emma paused. Are you going to be nicer now? Victoria almost smiled. I'm going to try. Trying is good, Emma said. That's what Daddy says. You have to try even when you're scared. Victoria looked up at Marcus, and something passed between them that didn't need words. She stood. The ownership group will want a full report, she said. They'll want to know how this happened and how it was resolved. I'll need your help documenting the technical details. I'll write it up. And I'll make sure they know who solved it. That's not necessary. It's necessary for me. She held his gaze a moment longer, then turned and walked toward the door. At the threshold, she paused. Mr. Webb. Yeah. Thank you. She walked out without waiting for a response. Marcus stood in the control room, his daughter's hand in his, surrounded by the quiet hum of a building that had finally remembered how to function. He had spent 3 years being invisible. Tonight, for better or worse, he had been seen. The news spread through Hartwell Tower like wildfire. By the time Marcus and Emma made it back to the 42nd floor, the operations hub was buzzing with a different kind of energy. The tension that had gripped the building for 4 days had broken, replaced by something Marcus hadn't expected: curiosity. People were looking at him. Not through him the way they usually did. At him. Their eyes followed his gray coveralls, his worn work boots, his calloused hands, still marked with the grime of the control room keyboards. They whispered to each other as he passed, not with the dismissive murmurs he had grown accustomed to, but with something that sounded almost like awe. Emma noticed it too. Daddy, why is everyone staring? Because they found out what happened. Is that bad? Marcus considered the question. A week ago, he would have said yes. Being seen meant being judged. Being visible meant being vulnerable to the kind of dismissal Victoria had delivered so casually. Invisibility had been his armor, his protection against a world that had already decided what he was worth. But now, with Emma's hand in his walking through corridors that suddenly felt different, he wasn't sure anymore. I don't know, sweetheart. I guess we'll find out. They had almost reached the break room when Derek caught up with them. Mr. Webb? Hey, Mr. Webb, wait up! Marcus stopped and turned. Derek was hurrying toward them, tablet clutched to his chest, his expression a complicated mixture of embarrassment and admiration. I just wanted to say... Derek paused, catching his breath. I wanted to say I'm sorry for before, when you tried to tell me about the calibration drift and I didn't listen. You were going to listen. Someone else decided you shouldn't. Yeah, but I should have pushed back. I should have at least asked you what you meant. Instead, I just... He shook his head. I don't know. I guess I assumed you couldn't possibly know anything useful, because of the uniform. Marcus studied the young man's face. There was genuine remorse there, the kind that came from recognizing something uncomfortable about yourself. You know what the hardest part of my job is? Marcus asked. Derek blinked. Cleaning? No, the hardest part is watching people make mistakes. I could help them avoid, and knowing they won't listen if I try. The hardest part is having the answer and being invisible. That sounds... Derek stopped. That sounds really lonely. It is. Emma tugged at Marcus's sleeve. Daddy, I'm hungry. Marcus looked down at his daughter, then back at Derek. I need to feed my kid, but Derek, thanks for the apology. It means something. Derek nodded. If you ever want to, I mean, if you'd be willing to show me some of the things you've observed about the building, I'd like to learn. If that's okay. It was such a simple request. Such a small acknowledgement that Marcus might have something worth teaching. But it landed in Marcus's chest like a gift. Yeah, he said. I'd like that. He walked Emma to the break room and scrounged together a meal from vending machines and the emergency supplies in his locker. She ate without complaint, her usual pickiness apparently suspended by the events of the day. Daddy. Yeah, sweetheart. That man said sorry to you. He did. Does that mean he sees you now? Like really sees you? Marcus thought about it. I think he's starting to. Sometimes it takes people a while to learn how to look. How come you already knew how to look at the building, I mean? How come you could see what nobody else could see? The question caught him off guard. He set down his coffee and gave it the consideration it deserved. Your mom taught me, he said finally. Emma's eyes widened. Mommy? Yeah, she used to say that most people go through life looking but not seeing. They look at what's in front of them, but they only see what they expect to find. She said the secret to really understanding something, a building, a person, a problem, is to look without expecting anything. To just pay attention and let the thing tell you what it is. Mommy was smart. She was the smartest person I ever knew. Emma was quiet for a moment, processing. Then she asked, Do you think Mommy can see us from wherever she is? Marcus felt his throat tighten. This was a question Emma asked, sometimes usually late at night, when the darkness made everything feel more uncertain. He never knew exactly how to answer it. I think, he said carefully, that Mommy loved us so much that some part of that love is still here. In you. In me. In the way we take care of each other. And maybe that's a kind of seeing. Emma considered this with the seriousness of a philosopher evaluating a proof. Okay, she said finally. I like that answer. Good. Now finish your chips. We've got a long night ahead. Are we going home? Not yet. I think some people are going to want to talk to me first. Emma nodded, unsurprised. Because you're famous now. Marcus almost laughed. I wouldn't say famous. The man with the glasses said you saved the building. That sounds pretty famous to me. She had a point. The ownership group wanted to see him. Victoria delivered this news an hour later, appearing in the break room doorway with an expression that suggested she had been through several difficult conversations since leaving the control room. They're on a conference call, she said. They want to thank you personally. They want to evaluate me, Marcus corrected. Figure out whether I'm a liability or an asset. Victoria's jaw tightened. Probably. But does it matter? You did what you did. They can't undo that. No. But they can decide how to spin it. And you think they'll spin it badly? Marcus shrugged. In my experience, people in power don't like being shown up by people without power. It makes them uncomfortable. And uncomfortable people do unpredictable things. Victoria was quiet for a moment. Then she said, You really don't trust anyone, do you? I trust Emma. I trusted my wife. Beyond that, he shook his head. Let's just say life has given me reasons to be careful. Victoria looked at Emma, who was coloring in her book with determined focus. She's lucky to have you. I'm lucky to have her. Victoria nodded slowly. The call is in the main conference room on 43. You don't have to go. I can tell them you're unavailable, that the technical documentation will have to suffice. But if you want to, I'll go. The words came out before Marcus had fully decided to say them. But once they were out, he realized he meant them. He had spent 3 years hiding. 3 years protecting himself from judgment by making himself invisible. And where had it gotten him? A front row seat to a crisis he could have prevented if only someone had been willing to listen. Maybe it was time to stop hiding. Emma stays with me, he said. Of course. He stood, reached for his daughter's hand, and walked toward the conference room on the 43rd floor. The ownership group consisted of 3 faces on a large screen, 2 men and a woman, all middle-aged, all wearing the kind of expensive suits that cost more than Marcus's monthly salary. Charles Whitmore, the chairman, spoke first. Mr. Webb, we've been briefed on the situation. I understand you played a significant role in resolving the system failure. I fixed it, Marcus said simply. Your consultants couldn't. There was a brief silence, the kind that suggested Marcus had already deviated from the script they expected him to follow. Yes, well. Whitmore cleared his throat. We're certainly grateful for your initiative. However, there are some concerns about protocol. You accessed restricted systems without authorization. You bypassed security measures. You made significant modifications to the building's infrastructure without oversight. Your building was going to trigger a fire suppression cascade within 48 hours. The fire marshal would have ordered a full evacuation. You would have lost tenants' revenue and reputation. I prevented that by acting outside the chain of command. The chain of command was failing. Another silence. The woman on the screen, Margaret Chen, according to the nameplate visible on her desk, leaned forward. Mr. Webb, what Dr. Wells tells us is that you have an engineering background, that you worked in the field before taking your current position. That's correct? May I ask why you chose to leave engineering? Marcus felt Emma's hand tighten in his. She knew this story. She had lived it. My wife was diagnosed with cancer 4 years ago. The treatment was aggressive. She needed constant care. I couldn't provide that and maintain an engineering career. After she died, I needed a job with flexible hours and no travel, so I could be present for my daughter. He paused. I chose to be a father first and an engineer second. The world decided that made me just a janitor. Margaret Chen's expression softened slightly. I'm sorry for your loss. Thank you. Whitmore jumped back in, apparently uncomfortable with the emotional turn. The question before us is how to proceed. We have a building that's now functioning properly thanks to your intervention. We also have a public relations situation to manage. The tenants are asking questions. The consultants are, let's say, unhappy about being proven wrong. With respect, sir, I don't care about your PR situation. I fixed your building because it needed fixing, not because I wanted recognition or reward. Then what do you want, Mr. Webb? The question hung in the air. Marcus thought about it. He thought about the years of invisibility, the casual dismissals, the assumptions that had been made about him based on his uniform and his job title. He thought about Emma watching and learning from every interaction he had with the world. I want you to create a program, he said finally. A formal channel for facility staff to report observations and concerns about building systems. Not a suggestion box that gets ignored. A real process with real follow-up where the people who actually maintain this building have a voice in how it's run. Whitmore frowned. That's not exactly standard practice. Neither is having a janitor save your building from catastrophic failure. But here we are. The third member of the ownership group, a man named Reynolds, who had been silent until now, spoke up. He's got a point, Charles. If Mr. Webb had a proper channel to report his concerns, we might have caught this problem months ago, before it became a crisis. We have maintenance logs, incident reports, which get filtered through management before they reach us. Mr. Webb is suggesting something different. Direct communication. Unfiltered input from the people closest to the infrastructure. Whitmore looked unconvinced, but Margaret Chen was nodding slowly. It's not an unreasonable request, and given what Mr. Webb has done for us, I think we should take it seriously. Whitmore sighed. Fine, we'll explore the idea. But Mr. Webb, I need to ask you something directly. Are you planning to go public with this talk to the press? Write a blog post about how the big corporation ignored the little guy. Marcus almost smiled. No, sir, I have no interest in being a story. I just want to do my job and raise my daughter. Then we understand each other. I think we do. The call ended with handshakes that couldn't happen through a screen and promises that might or might not be kept. Victoria walked Marcus and Emma back to the elevator, her expression thoughtful. That was well played, she said. Asking for systemic change instead of personal reward. It wasn't a strategy, it's what I actually want. I know. That's what made it effective. They expected you to ask for money or a promotion or some kind of recognition they could control. Instead, you asked them to change their behavior. That's much harder to dismiss. Marcus shrugged. We'll see if anything actually changes. It will. I'll make sure of it. He looked at her, surprised by the conviction in her voice. Why do you care? A week ago I was just a janitor to you. Victoria was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was softer than he had ever heard it. Because you showed me something about myself that I didn't want to see. And now I can't unsee it. The way I categorized people, the assumptions I made, the voices I ignored, it wasn't just about you. It was about everyone who didn't fit my definition of worth. And if I don't change that, I'm going to spend my whole career being wrong about people. She paused. You didn't just fix the building, Mr. Webb. You fixed something in me. Or at least you started the repair. Emma, who had been listening quietly, tugged at Victoria's sleeve. Are you going to be different now? Like really different? Victoria knelt down to Emma's level, the same way she had in the control room. I'm going to try really hard. But Emma, can I tell you a secret? Emma nodded solemnly. Changing is scary. It means admitting you were wrong, which is hard. And it means doing things differently, which is also hard. But your daddy showed me that being scared isn't a good enough reason not to try. Daddy says that to me sometimes, when I don't want to do something hard. Your daddy is a wise man. I know. Emma smiled. He's also really good at fixing things. Victoria smiled back, a genuine smile, the first Marcus had seen from her. Yes, he is. The next few days passed in a blur of attention Marcus wasn't used to receiving. People stopped him in corridors to thank him. Security guards who had never acknowledged his existence suddenly wanted to shake his hand. The administrative staff on the 42nd floor started saving him coffee from their morning meetings. It was disorienting, overwhelming. Sometimes it felt like too much. But Emma helped him navigate it. She had an instinct for when he needed space, pulling him away from conversations that went too long, redirecting well-wishers with the firm politeness of a 7-year-old who had learned to protect her father. "Daddy needs to work now," she would say. "Thank you for saying nice things." And people listened. They listened to a child in a way they had never listened to her father before the crisis. Marcus noticed something else too. The way other staff members carried themselves had started to change. The cleaning crew walked taller. The security guards spoke up more in meetings. The maintenance workers offered suggestions without waiting to be asked. It was as if his visibility had created space for others to be visible too. 1 week after the crisis, Derek approached him with a proposal. "I've been thinking about what you said. About watching people make mistakes you could help them avoid." "Yeah. What if we created a system like a knowledge base but for the building, where people like you, people who actually work with the infrastructure every day, could document what they observe? Patterns, anomalies, things that might become problems later." Marcus considered it. The ownership group talked about creating channels for input. This would be different. This wouldn't go through management. It would be a shared resource accessible to anyone who needed it. Engineering, maintenance, operations, everyone would be able to see what everyone else was seeing. That's a big project. I know, but I think it could prevent a lot of problems, and I think you're the right person to help design it. Marcus looked at Derek, really looked at him the way he looked at the building systems, the way Claire had taught him to look at the world. What he saw was a young man trying to do better, trying to build something that mattered, trying to make sure that the next person like Marcus wouldn't have to choose between being invisible and being heard. "Okay," Marcus said. "Let's talk about it." Emma was with him as always. She sat in the corner of the conference room where Derek had set up his laptop coloring while the adults talked about databases and user interfaces and information architecture. But she was listening too. Marcus could tell by the way her crayon moved slowly when something interesting was being said quickly during the boring parts. After an hour, Derek stepped out to take a phone call. Marcus walked over to Emma and sat down beside her. "You okay, sweetheart? This is probably pretty boring." "It's okay. I like hearing you talk about building stuff." Yeah, you sound different when you talk about it, like you're happy." Marcus thought about that. She was right. For the first time in 3 years, he was doing work that used his full capabilities. Work that mattered. Work that might actually make a difference. "I guess I am happy," he admitted. "Does that mean you're going to stop being a janitor?" The question cut straight to the heart of something Marcus had been avoiding. "I don't know, sweetheart. What do you think I should do?" Emma set down her crayon and turned to face him with the grave attention of a child who understood she was being consulted on something important. "I think you should do whatever makes you happy. But Daddy..." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "I don't want you to be invisible anymore. I want people to see you the way I see you." Marcus felt tears prick at his eyes. "Even if it means I might have to work more. Travel sometimes, not be there for every school play." Emma was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Mommy told you not to disappear, right?" Marcus's breath caught. "How do you know about that?" "I heard you tell Grandma once, after the funeral." He had forgotten that conversation, had blocked it out along with so much else from those terrible weeks after Claire died. "She wanted you to use your gift," Emma continued. "That's what you told Grandma. She wanted you to help people. And I think..." She stopped, her small face serious. "I think maybe being invisible was a kind of disappearing. Even if you were still here with me." Marcus stared at his daughter. When had she grown up so much? When had she started understanding things that took most adults decades to figure out? "You're too smart for 7 years old," he said finally. "Grandma says I take after Mommy." "You do. You really do." Emma smiled and picked up her crayon again. "So are you going to stop disappearing?" Marcus thought about Claire. about the promise he had made, about the years he had spent hiding from a world that had hurt him, protecting himself from expectations he was afraid he couldn't meet. And he thought about Emma, who had watched him be dismissed and diminished, who had learned lessons about worth and value from the way the world treated her father. "Yeah," he said. "I think I am." Derek returned from his phone call, and they resumed their discussion of the knowledge-based system. But something had shifted in Marcus. A decision had crystallized. A path had emerged from the fog of uncertainty that had surrounded his future since Claire died. He wasn't going to be invisible anymore. He wasn't sure yet what that meant, whether he would return to engineering or stay in facilities, but with an expanded role, or find some new path entirely. But whatever he did, he would do it as himself. Fully present. Fully visible. For Emma. For Claire. For all the people like him who had been sorted into categories that had nothing to do with who they actually were. The meeting with Derek ended late in the evening. Emma had fallen asleep in her corner, her coloring book serving as a pillow. Her small body curled into a position that looked uncomfortable but somehow peaceful. Marcus gathered her gently, lifting her without waking her, and headed toward the elevator. The building hummed around him, the same building he had tended for 3 years. The same building that had revealed itself to him night after night, sharing its secrets with someone patient enough to listen. But tonight, it felt different. Tonight it felt like a beginning rather than an ending. He pressed the button for the ground floor and waited as the elevator descended. Emma stirred in his arms. "Daddy? Hey, sweetheart, we're going home." "Did you finish your meeting?" "Yeah, Derek and I made a lot of progress." "That's good." She yawned and nestled closer. "Daddy, yeah, I'm proud of you." Marcus's arms tightened around his daughter. "I'm proud of you too, sweetheart, more than you know." The elevator doors opened. Marcus stepped out into the lobby, carrying his daughter, carrying 3 years of observations and insights, and suppressed expertise, carrying the memory of a wife who had told him not to disappear. He walked out of Hartwell Tower and into the night. Behind him, the building stood tall against the city skyline, its systems humming in perfect harmony, its secrets finally shared with people who were willing to listen. Marcus didn't look back. He was too busy looking forward. 1 year passed. Marcus learned that time moves differently when you stop hiding from it. The days felt fuller, more textured, weighted with meaning in ways they hadn't been since Claire died. He still worked at Hartwell Tower, but nothing else about his life remained the same. The knowledge-based system he had designed with Derek launched 6 months after the crisis. They called it the Observer Network, a name Emma had suggested one evening over dinner, her face bright with the pride of a child who had contributed something important. "Because that's what you do, Daddy. You observe. And now other people can observe too." The system had started small, just the maintenance staff and a few engineering techs logging their observations about building systems. But it grew. Security guards began noting patterns in foot traffic and access points. Administrative staff flagged inconsistencies in scheduling and resource allocation. Even the cleaning crew, Marcus's former colleagues on the night shift, started documenting things they noticed during their rounds. Within 3 months, the Observer Network had identified 17 potential issues before they became problems. A failing pump in the cooling system. A wiring degradation in the east stairwell. A ventilation imbalance that would have triggered air quality complaints within weeks. Hartwell Tower had become a building that listened to itself. And Marcus had become something he never expected to be, a voice that people sought out. "Mr. Webb, do you have a minute?" He turned from the console where he was reviewing the morning's observation logs. Sarah Chen, the junior analyst who had almost approached him during the crisis before Victoria's dismissal, cut her off, stood in the doorway of his new office. His office. The phrase still felt strange even after 6 months. "Of course. What's up?" Sarah stepped inside, tablet in hand. "We're seeing some unusual readings from the pressure sensors on 38. The pattern looks familiar, but I can't quite place it." Marcus gestured for her to show him. She handed over the tablet, and he studied the data with the practiced eye of someone who had spent years learning to read the building's language. 12-minute cycles, he murmured. Minor fluctuation, but consistent. That's what caught my attention. It reminded me of the original cascade. Yeah. He handed the tablet back. It's not the same problem, though. See how the amplitude is different. This is probably just sensor drift from the temperature changes we had last week. Run a manual calibration check and log it in the system. If the pattern persists after calibration, we'll dig deeper. Sarah nodded, relief evident on her face. Thank you. I wasn't sure if I was overreacting. You weren't. Noticing patterns is exactly what the observer network is for. Better to flag something that turns out to be nothing than to ignore something that turns out to be everything. She smiled. That's what you always say. Because it's true. Sarah left and Marcus turned back to his console. Through the glass wall of his office, he could see the operations hub, the same space where Victoria had dismissed him a year ago. The same space where Emma had stood in the doorway and declared that her daddy knew everything about this building. So much had changed since then. And yet, in the ways that mattered most, nothing had changed at all. He was still a father, still a widower, still a man who had chosen presence over prestige, who had built his life around a 7-year-old girl who needed him more than any career could. The difference was that now he did both. Emma arrived at his office at 3:30 p.m. as she did every day after school. Mrs. Patterson had retired at the end of the previous school year, and the new daycare arrangement involved Emma spending the last 2 hours of Marcus's workday in his office, doing homework at the small desk he had set up in the corner. Daddy? She burst through the door with the energy of an 8-year-old who had been sitting still for too long, her backpack bouncing against her shoulders, her braids flying behind her. Hey, sweetheart, how was school? Good. We learned about ecosystems today. Mrs. Rodriguez said an ecosystem is like a building. Everything is connected, and if one part gets sick, it can make other parts sick too. Marcus smiled. Mrs. Rodriguez sounds smart. She is. I told her about the observer network, and she said it was like creating an immune system for the building, so it can fight off problems before they get bad. That's a good way to think about it. Emma settled into her corner desk and pulled out her homework. But instead of starting, she looked up at her father with the expression that meant a big question was coming. Daddy. Yeah. Do you ever miss being invisible? The question caught him off guard. He set down his coffee and gave it the serious consideration it deserved. Sometimes, he admitted. Being visible is harder. People have expectations now. They want things from me. Sometimes I make mistakes and everyone sees. But you didn't make mistakes when you were invisible. I made plenty of mistakes. The difference is, nobody noticed, which meant nobody helped me fix them, but it also meant nobody judged me for them. Emma nodded, slowly processing this. So being invisible is like being safe, but also being alone. Marcus stared at his daughter. Sometimes she said things that made him wonder if she was actually 7 going on 40. Yeah, he said. That's exactly what it's like. I don't think I'd want to be invisible, Emma said thoughtfully. Even if it was safer, I'd rather have people see me and help me when I make mistakes. That's because you're braver than I was. No. Emma shook her head firmly. It's because you taught me. You showed me that being seen is better than being safe. Marcus felt his throat tighten. When did you get so wise? I learned from watching you, Daddy. She grinned. And from Mommy. I talk to her sometimes in my head. She gives good advice. What kind of advice? She told me to always tell the truth even when it's scary, and to never let anyone make me feel small, and to take care of you because you forget to take care of yourself sometimes. Marcus laughed, blinking back tears. She's right about that last one. I know. That's why I remind you to eat lunch. And I appreciate it, sweetheart, more than you know. Emma returned to her homework and Marcus returned to his console, but his mind was elsewhere. He was thinking about Claire, about the advice she was apparently still giving from wherever she was. About the way she had always pushed him to be more than he thought he could be. Don't disappear, she had told him. He hadn't. Not anymore. At 5 p.m., Victoria appeared in his doorway. She looked different than she had a year ago. Not just her appearance, though she had softened her wardrobe, traded some of the sharp edges for something more approachable, but something in her bearing. The armor she had worn so visibly during the crisis had been replaced by something more flexible, more human. Got a minute? Marcus nodded. Emma. Miss Hayes and I need to talk. Can you work in the break room for a bit? Emma gathered her homework without complaint. As she passed Victoria in the doorway, she paused. Hi, Miss Hayes. Hi, Emma. How's third grade? Good. We're learning about ecosystems. That sounds interesting. It is. Did you know that if you remove one species from an ecosystem, it can cause a cascade that affects everything else? Kind of like what happened to the building. Victoria smiled. I did know that. Your daddy taught me. Emma nodded approvingly and headed toward the break room. Victoria watched her go with an expression that had become familiar over the past year, a mixture of fondness and something like wonder. She's growing up so fast. Too fast, Marcus agreed. What's on your mind? Victoria stepped into the office and closed the door behind her, a gesture that told Marcus this was serious. The ownership group wants to promote you. Marcus blinked. Excuse me. They want to create a new position. Director of Building Intelligence. You'd oversee the observer network, coordinate between maintenance and engineering, serve as a consultant for other properties in their portfolio. Significant salary increase. Corner office. The works. Marcus sat back in his chair, processing. I have a corner office. You have a converted storage room with a glass wall. It has a window. The window faces the parking garage. Despite himself, Marcus laughed. Fair point. Victoria didn't laugh. Her expression remained serious, almost anxious. This isn't charity, Marcus, and it's not guilt. The Observer Network has saved them hundreds of thousands of dollars in prevented failures. The other property managers are asking how they can implement something similar. You've created value, real measurable value, and they want to capture more of it. And they need me to do that. They need someone who understands the philosophy behind the system. Not just the technology, but the approach. The willingness to listen to people who are usually ignored. That's not something you can hire off the street. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. A year ago, he would have refused without hesitation. A year ago, visibility still felt like danger, and advancement felt like a betrayal of the choice he had made when Claire died. But a year ago, his daughter had stood in a doorway and told a room full of executives that her daddy was amazing. A year ago, he had learned that being invisible wasn't protection, it was just a slower way of disappearing. What about Emma? What about her? The hours. The travel to other properties. I became a janitor so I could be there for her. I'm not going to sacrifice that for a corner office that faces something better than a parking garage. Victoria nodded, as if she had expected this. The position would be flexible. Remote work options. No overnight travel unless absolutely necessary. They're willing to accommodate whatever you need to make it work for your family. Why? Because you're worth it. Victoria paused. And because I told them that if they wanted you, they'd have to work around your priorities, not the other way around. Marcus studied her face. You advocated for me. I advocated for common sense. You're the best person for this job. If they're not willing to make it accessible to you, they don't deserve you. That's... He stopped, searching for the right word. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. The board still has to approve the position. But Charles Whitmore is on board, and Margaret Chen has been your champion since the crisis. Reynolds might need some convincing, but I think we can get there. And if we can't, Victoria shrugged, then nothing changes. You keep doing what you're doing. The Observer Network keeps growing, and eventually they realize they're leaving value on the table. Marcus shook his head slowly. You're not the same person you were a year ago. Neither are you. I was always this person. I was just hiding. Maybe. Victoria met his eyes. But I wasn't always this person. The woman who called you just a janitor, she was real. She was who I had become after years of climbing and competing and sorting people into categories of usefulness. You helped me see that. Emma helped you see that. Emma helped. But you're the one who stood in that control room and fixed something everyone else had given up on. You're the one who asked for systemic change instead of personal reward. You're the one who showed me that being wrong about people is worse than being wrong about systems. Marcus was quiet for a moment. Then he said, I'll think about the promotion. That's all I'm asking. Victoria stood to leave, but at the door she paused. Marcus. Yeah. For what it's worth, I'm glad you stopped being invisible. The building needed you. The Observer Network needed you. And honestly, she smiled. I needed someone to show me how wrong I was. Most people don't get that kind of wake-up call. Most people don't listen even when they get it. I almost didn't. But Emma... Victoria shook her head. When a 7-year-old looks you in the eye and tells you that you're wrong, something inside you has to either harden or break. I'm grateful I broke. She left before Marcus could respond. He sat alone in his office, staring at the wall, thinking about choices and changes and the strange paths that life takes when you stop trying to control them. Then he went to find his daughter. Emma was in the break room, her homework spread across the table, her tongue poking out in concentration as she worked through a math problem. Marcus sat down across from her. Hey, sweetheart. I need to talk to you about something. Emma looked up instantly alert. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. He paused, trying to find the right words. You know how I've been doing new things at work, the Observer Network, helping Derek, talking to the people in charge? Yeah? Well, they want me to do more. They want to give me a bigger job, more responsibility, more... He hesitated. More visibility. Emma's eyes widened. Like a promotion. Yeah, like a promotion. Daddy, that's amazing. She jumped up from her chair and threw her arms around him. I'm so proud of you. Marcus hugged her back, but when she pulled away, he held her at arm's length. Wait, we need to talk about what it means. What does it mean? It means I might have more meetings, might have to work a little longer some days, might have to visit other buildings sometimes, which would mean travel. Emma's face grew serious. Like before, when you were an engineer and you had to go away. Not like before, I made sure of that. But some travel. Some days where I can't pick you up from school right away. Emma was quiet for a moment, thinking. Marcus weighted his heart in his throat, knowing that her answer mattered more than anything the ownership group could offer. Daddy, she said finally. Do you want the job? I don't know, I think so. But not if it means... I think you should take it. Marcus blinked. You do? Yeah. Emma nodded firmly. Because you're happy when you do building stuff. Really happy. And I don't want you to miss being happy because you're worried about me. Emma, you're my priority. You always will be. I know. But Daddy... She took his hands in her small ones. You can be my priority and still do things that make you happy. That's what Mommy would say. Marcus felt tears threatening again. How do you know what Mommy would say? Because I know Mommy. She's in here. Emma touched her chest. And she's in here. She touched her head. And she's definitely in here. She pointed at Marcus's chest. She wants you to be happy, Daddy. She wants you to use your gift. Marcus pulled his daughter into his arms and held her tight. When did you get so grown up? I've been watching you for a year. You taught me that being brave is better than being scared. I think you taught me that. Maybe we taught each other. Marcus laughed through his tears. Maybe we did. He made his decision that night, lying in bed after Emma had fallen asleep, staring at the ceiling in the darkness. He thought about Claire. about the promise he had made at her bedside, about the years of hiding that had followed the comfortable invisibility, the slow disappearance into a role that protected him from expectation and judgment. And he thought about what Emma had said, that being scared wasn't a good enough reason not to try. That being his priority didn't mean he had to sacrifice everything else. Claire hadn't asked him to become a janitor. She had asked him to be present for Emma, to not disappear into work the way he had been doing before her diagnosis, to remember that his daughter needed a father more than the world needed another systems consultant. He had kept that promise. For 3 years he had been there for every school play, every nightmare, every question about why the world worked the way it did. But somewhere along the way, he had confused presence with invisibility. He had told himself that shrinking was the same as being there, that hiding his capabilities was necessary for being a good father. It wasn't. It never had been. Emma didn't need a father who hid. She needed a father who showed her what it looked like to be fully yourself, to use your gifts, to be seen to contribute to the world without apology. She needed him to stop disappearing. He called Victoria the next morning. "I'll take the job." The months that followed were hard, harder than Marcus had expected. He learned that visibility came with costs he hadn't anticipated. More eyes watching meant more opportunities for failure. More responsibility meant more pressure. More people depending on him meant more chances to let someone down. But he also learned that he wasn't alone. Derek became his unofficial second-in-command, handling the technical implementation of the Observer Network, while Marcus focused on strategy and training. Sarah Chen took over daily, monitoring her instincts growing sharper every week. Even the night shift cleaning crew, his former colleagues, became ambassadors for the system, mentoring new staff in the art of paying attention. And Emma remained his anchor. She was there when he came home frustrated from difficult meetings. There when he doubted whether he was capable of the role he had accepted. There when the weight of visibility felt like too much to bear. "Daddy, remember what you told me about the building? How it wasn't failing randomly, it was responding logically to bad information." "Yeah. Maybe that's what's happening with you. Maybe you're stressed because you're working with old information. You keep thinking you're not good enough because that's what people told you for a long time. But that information is wrong. You just have to teach yourself something different." Marcus stared at his 8-year-old daughter. "That's actually really smart." "I know," Emma grinned. "I get it from you." The 1-year anniversary of the crisis arrived on a Thursday. Victoria organized a small gathering in the operations hub, nothing elaborate, just coffee and pastries for the people who had been there when it happened. Derek came, and Sarah and a few others who remembered those tense 4 days when Hartwell Tower had teetered on the edge of catastrophe. And Emma, of course. Always Emma. She sat in her plastic chair, the same chair she had occupied a year ago, watching the adults mingle and talk and remember. Her backpack was beside her, slightly smaller, now fitting her growing frame better than it had before. Marcus found himself standing near the glass partition, looking out at the corridor where everything had started, where Victoria had pointed at him and said 5 words that had changed both their lives. Victoria appeared beside him. "Thinking about that day. Hard not to. What do you remember most?" Marcus considered the question. Emma, standing in the doorway, telling a room full of executives that her daddy was amazing. That was quite a moment. She's quite a kid. They stood in silence for a while, watching the gathering through the glass. "You know," Victoria said eventually, "I've been thinking about something you said during the crisis. You said that the hardest part of your job was watching people make mistakes you could help them avoid knowing they wouldn't listen. I remember. Is that still true? Now that you're the director of building intelligence with a corner office that faces something better than a parking garage?" Marcus smiled. "The office faces the park, actually," Emma insisted. "Of course she did, but you didn't answer my question." He thought about it, really thought about it. "No," he said finally. "It's not true anymore. People listen now. Not because of the title or the office, but because we built something that teaches them to listen. The Observer Network isn't just a system, it's a philosophy. Everyone has something worth noticing. Everyone's observations have value. That sounds like something Claire would say. Marcus turned to look at her. How do you know about Claire? Emma told me, during one of our conversations. Victoria smiled at his surprise. What? You didn't think your daughter and I talk? I didn't know. She's remarkable, Marcus. She sees everything, notices everything, just like her father. She gets that from her mother. Maybe, but she learned to use it from you. Marcus was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Thank you, Victoria." For what? For listening. A year ago, you made a choice that could have ended your career. You trusted a janitor over 7 consultants. You cleared a control room and gave me 4 hours to prove I was more than my uniform. I almost didn't. But you did. And because you did, Emma got to see her father be seen. That mattered to her. It still matters. Victoria's eyes glistened. I got something out of it too, you know. I got to watch someone teach me everything I thought I knew was wrong. I got to change. That's not nothing. No. Marcus agreed. It's not. Emma appeared at his elbow, her face eager with excitement. Daddy, can I make a toast? Marcus exchanged a glance with Victoria. A toast. Yeah, Mrs. Rodriguez taught us about toasts. She said they're how you celebrate important things with words. I know what a toast is, sweetheart. I'm just surprised you want to give one. I've been practicing. She looked up at him with those eyes, Claire's eyes full of determination and barely contained joy. Please. Marcus looked at Victoria, who shrugged. I'd like to hear it, she said. Okay. Marcus raised his voice to get the room's attention. Everyone, my daughter has something she'd like to say. The gathering quieted. All eyes turned to the small girl with the braids and the backpack, and the expression of someone who had something important to share. Emma cleared her throat. A year ago, a lady called my daddy just a janitor. She didn't know that he was the smartest person in the building. She didn't know that he could fix things nobody else could fix. She just saw his uniform and decided he wasn't important. The room was absolutely silent. But my daddy didn't give up. He kept trying to help even when people didn't want to listen. And when they finally listened, he fixed the building. He fixed it better than anyone else could. Emma looked at Victoria, and her expression softened. The lady who said those mean words, she's different now. She listened. She learned. She became my daddy's friend. And that's important too, because it means people can change. Even grown-ups who think they already know everything. A soft laugh rippled through the room. My daddy taught me that everybody has gifts, not just the people with big offices and fancy degrees, the security guards, the cleaning people, the people who make sure the building works every single day. They all see things, they all know things, and when you listen to them, you can fix problems before they even happen. She raised her juice box. So this is my toast. To the people who pay attention, to the people who listen, and to my daddy, who showed everyone that nobody is just anything. She took a sip of her juice. For a moment, nobody moved. Then Victoria started clapping. And Derek, and Sarah, and everyone else in the room, a wave of applause that seemed too large for the small gathering it came from. Emma blushed and retreated to her father's side. Marcus wrapped an arm around her shoulders and pulled her close. That was beautiful, sweetheart. I practiced in the mirror last night. It showed. Daddy. Yeah. Is Mommy proud of us? Marcus felt his heart clench. He looked around the room at the people who had become his colleagues, his allies, his friends. At Victoria, who had transformed from adversary to advocate. At Derek, who had believed in him when belief was scarce. At the building that had revealed its secrets to someone patient enough to listen. And he thought about Claire, about her faith in him, about her final request. Don't disappear. Yeah, sweetheart, he said. I think she's very proud. The gathering wound down as the afternoon faded into evening. People returned to their desks, their tasks, their lives. The operations hub emptied until only Marcus and Emma remained standing by the window, watching the city lights begin to flicker on. "Daddy." "Yeah." "Can we go home now?" "Yeah, let's go home." He took her hand and led her toward the elevator. As they walked, he passed the spot where he had stood a year ago, mop in hand, invisible, dismissed, certain that his voice would never be heard. He wasn't that person anymore. He was a father, an engineer, a director, a man who had learned that hiding wasn't protection, that invisibility wasn't safety, that being seen was worth the risk of being judged. And he had an 8-year-old daughter who had taught him all of that simply by believing in him when no one else would. The elevator doors opened. Marcus and Emma stepped inside. "Daddy." "Yeah, sweetheart. I love you." "I love you too, Emma. More than anything in the world." The doors closed. The elevator descended. And Marcus Webb, former janitor, current director, forever father, went home with his daughter, carrying nothing but the knowledge that he had finally become the man his wife had always believed he could be. Because in the end, that was the only truth that mattered. No one is just anything. Every person contains world's hidden depths, unexpected gifts, capabilities waiting to be recognized by anyone willing to pay attention. The building knew this now. Its people knew this. And Marcus Webb, who had spent 3 years being invisible, had finally learned to let himself be seen.